In the days leading up to my mother-in-law's return, I couldn't find a place to be. I couldn't stop thinking about how we would all live together when she returned. How we would live together occupied all my thoughts, especially when it came to Betty. Sooner or later, she would realize that something was wrong between me and her mom. But even if she didn't find out, the thought of sharing a bed with them seemed impossible. Maybe they'd come to some sort of agreement and we'd all sleep together, but I couldn't imagine sleeping with two women at the same time, especially if one of them was as cold as ice and the other was as hot as a flame. Time passed, and I still had no answers to my questions. Then, on Friday night, the doorbell rang. I wondered if Betty had come back from the store so soon. Maybe she had forgotten something. But to my surprise, it was my mother-in-law standing on the doorstep. As soon as she stepped over the threshold, she hugged me tightly, showering me with passionate kisses on my lips, nose, and neck. Looking around, she whispered, "Is my daughter home?" Confused, I shook my head. "No, she's gone to the store and will be back soon." Wasting no time, my mother-in-law grabbed my hand and led me to her room. Let's go quickly. Toward evening, she entered our room without even noticing my presence and informed her daughter that she was leaving for the country house the next day. "Will you come with me?" she asked. Betty, as usual, began to whine. "No, Mom. What am I going to do there? My back still hasn't recovered from last time I had to pick raspberries. And the currants and cherries are ripe, and you know how much you love cherry juice and blackcurrant jam." "I know, but I'm not going to the village," she answered. Betty made a displeased expression with her lips. "I have my own things to do. It would be better if you took Victor with you. He can pick raspberries for you, and also pick cherries. As for me, I have some paperwork to do for the IRS. Look, I brought 2 stacks of papers from work that I need to go through. I have to go through them all over the weekend and present the bill to the boss on Monday morning. During the 2 days I spent in my mother-in-law's village, I only went outside a couple times. The rest of the time I lay in bed." She picked all the raspberries, currants, and cherries and put them in buckets. "You can rest, son-in-law, while I prepare a delicious meal for you." The mother-in-law quickly got out of bed and hurried to the kitchen. "Dorothy," I called to her, "at least get dressed. Why are you almost naked? You've been walking outside all day." My mother-in-law smiled and replied, "There are no neighbors around our house. They are all in town. So you can have fun. No one will know." So until late fall, my mother-in-law and I went every weekend to the village, to the dacha. I helped her pick cucumbers, zucchini, eggplants, and watermelons. We also dug up delicious potatoes and put them all in the cellar. "Oh, Victor, it's great to be with you." My dear mother-in-law looked fondly into my eyes and sighed dreamily. "Do you love my daughter, Betty?" Suddenly my mother-in-law asked, "Betty?" I was taken aback by her question and looked at my mother-in-law confused. "Of course I love her. We've been together for years, you know. And she loves me so much. I can feel it. Absolutely. You go on with your life, and I'll try to stay out of your way. But don't forget that I'm here for you too." Dorothy said these words to me during our last days at the country house. A few days later, back in town, she called me into her room and held out a small piece of paper. "What is this?" I asked in surprise. She threw herself into my arms and exclaimed, "It's our baby, Victor. I'm pregnant. Can you believe it?" "It's your baby, my love. Yours." All winter long, she hid her pregnancy under simple sweaters and blouses. As spring came, however, her growing belly became more and more visible to everyone. One day, Dorothy caught her in the kitchen and stared at her in amazement. "Why is your belly so big? Are you pregnant?" she asked. My mother-in-law calmly replied, "Yes, I am pregnant." "Is it really that hard to guess?" Betty grinned unhappily and said, "What's there to guess? It's obvious enough." Her mother-in-law looked at her proudly and said, "Do you think I'm stupid?" I know who fathered the child. Trying to keep the conversation quiet, Betty pleaded, Okay, Mom, don't be mad. Betty's mother-in-law continued, Do you know who it's going to be? I'm having a boy. Have you thought about what you're going to name him yet? Betty hesitated and replied, Not yet. Why don't you give me a hint? What's your favorite name? I don't know, Betty said. Kevin, maybe? Do you like that name? Kevin? That's a good name. Let it be Kevin, her mother-in-law agreed. Many of our friends, acquaintances, and even neighbors began to assume that Betty and I would be the parents. Betty, who had given up hope of getting pregnant and becoming a mother, didn't mind so much and answered their questions vaguely. Oh, of course it's our baby. From the day we brought Kevin home, Betty took care of him. She bathed him, changed his diapers, but she didn't breastfeed him. She treated him as if he were her own child. One day, coming home early from work, she caught my mother-in-law breastfeeding Kevin in front of me. Mom! She immediately scolded her, telling her that she shouldn't breastfeed a baby in front of her son-in-law. The mother-in-law advised Betty to take off her bra, try breastfeeding the baby, and maybe she would get some milk. Surprisingly, after constantly putting Kevin to her breast, Betty began to produce milk. You know what, daughter? Her mother said. I've been thinking about it, and I've decided that you'd better quit your job. The money you make there isn't even enough for diapers for the baby. You stay home with the baby and breastfeed him, and I'll go to work. They kept my job, promised a raise, and we bought a nice stroller for the baby. Now when everyone sees Betty walking with the baby in the park near our house, no one doubts that it's her baby. But most importantly, she started to believe it herself. That summer, my mother-in-law and I didn't go to the country. We focused on Kevin, but Betty was very reluctant to let us play with him. She wouldn't even let us hold him in our arms. At least I can feed him, my mother-in-law complained. You don't need to feed him. He's already eaten, Betty replied, taking Kevin away from his birth mother. I have nowhere to put my milk. Even at night, when Kevin cried, she wouldn't let us near him. Then one day, Betty gathered us all in a room and firmly declared, a complete family should have at least 2 children. I demand that you give me a daughter. Dorothy and I were shocked by what we heard. It was, to say the least, unexpected. Take your pillow and go live with your mother, she said. I don't need to be here in front of me, secretly having fun while I'm out with Kevin. My mother-in-law was visibly shocked and almost fell over with surprise. How did you guess? She asked. That you gave birth to Kevin's by Victor? Betty smiled ironically. He looks a lot like him. Betty reassured her mom by saying, Don't worry, Mom. I'm going to live with Victor. I won't change anything about this family. And I won't have any claims on you. I just want Victor to remember that he has a legitimate wife, and at least visit me once in a while. I need that as a woman. From that day forward, I began living openly with my mother-in-law and Betty. She even allowed us to play with the baby and let Dorothy breastfeed her son. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, Dorothy told me to get a pillow and go to Betty's house. You haven't spent time with her in a long time. No healthy woman can go that long without a man. Later, in the kitchen, they called me with some interesting news. Victor, come here. We have good news, they said. We're both pregnant. We're going to have more than one child now. Get ready to be a father again, Victor. A father of 2 beautiful girls. They handed me a ticket to the Canary Islands, telling me to take a vacation and build up my strength because I would soon have twice as much work. After I came back from my vacation, I had a surprise at home. Betty went for a sonogram and was told she was having 2 girls, so now we would have 4 children instead of 3. 1 boy and 3 girls. Now I'm starting to have some really hard days,